Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with the esteemed Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we have a recurring guest with a great subject matter this week, and that's Keith Reynolds. Keith, welcome to Carnivore Radio, and you'll be talking about some new trends. Maybe we can just go through the list together. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy hearing that. A list of new trends that are going to impact the business world and society. Welcome, Keith.
Hey, thank you. Good to be on with you guys again.
Great. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. So let's just talk a little bit about the list, and then we'll go down to the items involved.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of changes over this last year, and everybody's starting to come out of their cocoons. Like the Munchkins coming out after the house fell in the land of Oz. So, cautious first steps, but a lot of things really driving change in our as well as we do.
Yeah, that's interesting because now that we are coming out of it, that was a horrific 18 months, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as we do, one of the things that our people are looking at is their business model. Is it still relevant? How do we do business? Provide services? How has your industry changed?
That is a very interesting point, and maybe you and Dr. Lopkin can kind of get into this because I think it's fascinating. I think our listeners would find it fascinating. COVID has changed things, not just during the pandemic and the immediate time after that, but could have changed some industries forever. Mr. Reynolds, you first.
Oh, whether you're doing business and selling to companies and part of their supply chain, or you're a restaurant, you are having to have all kinds of new tools to reach your customers and do business with them. So whether that's in a small business creating home delivery, or in a big business plugging into a reconfigured supply chain.
Interesting. I watch a show called Bar Rescue from time to time. I used to watch it more often, but I forgot his name, the guy who does that, a very colorful figure. But he was saying that he was talking about restaurants with COVID that, and this is during the pandemic, but he says after the pandemic, there's going to be things like, cameras in the kitchen so people can, cleanliness is going, and there's going to be no such thing as like handling food and then change or, cashing out as well. So let's look at the restaurant industry. We'll start with, how about Dr. Lopkin? What changes, permanent changes, not just during this pandemic or the immediate time after, do you see like in the restaurant industry? One thing I'll say before you go on, I think buffets are gone.
Yeah. Would you eat one?
I'm not so sure about that. I mean, certainly in the immediate future, but I wouldn't say that's a permanent change.
I have a feeling it's going to be a little more permanent, but again, that's what this show's all about. So what other changes do you see in the restaurant business? Dr. Lopkin first.
Well, you've seen a lot of change in supply chain. Restaurants are going to be more cognizant about where they're getting their supplies, how many suppliers they have, because a lot of them, even if they were able to stay open, one supplier was not able to get them everything they needed. So they're going to be more flexible. I think a lot of what you're going to see is huge advances in takeout and delivery. because you're still going to
Agreed.
have people that don't really want to be out in public. They're still going to want to have that convenience of being at home. And you're going to see different spacing now, because people are going to still want to be, a little further apart for a little while. And I think a lot of people have actually come to enjoy the outdoor dining, so you're going to see more restaurants taking advantage of that.
Interesting. Keith?
And in terms of changing your business model, I've also seen restaurants turn to teaching cooking lessons and sending home unprepared foods and meal kits. So it really, the whole point of this is that you get to innovate and you get to do things and experiment with things, and who knows where that'll lead to with your business.
Oh, interesting. I think one trend that was already beginning, but I think this is going to just be accelerated, is the delivery of prepared meals. I think people, one of the things they did, I believe, during the pandemic is get takeout more, and I think that's a trend that's going to stay with us for a while, because it was one of the few enjoyments that you could actually participate with. And I think actually those Hello Fresh and these, I don't know the other ones offhand, prepared meals that are delivered that you have to actually cook after. But I think that's going to accelerate as well. Mr. Reynolds?
I think all of these are examples of how business model innovation is right at the heart of what we're all going through. And another one is automation. Whether automating processes and using software to do things that we may have done manually in the past.
And how does that relate to the pandemic? Do you think that was an ongoing trend?
I think that's an ongoing trend.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to look at a business process, find out where are inefficiencies, where can we shift resources and redeploy people to other parts of our business, take the steps out, use artificial intelligence to understand and deliver services to people. All kinds of things are being automated today. When you go on a website,
I want to throw something out there.
Go ahead.
But doesn't it have ramifications for global development? Because it used to be on the food chain, so to speak, is that you'd have a country like Japan, right after World War II, making inexpensive, very technologically neutral kind of products. Then it was China. The point is, with the artificial intelligence, robotics, automation, there's less of a need to ship overseas or outsource overseas for low-cost labor, isn't there?
Yeah, well, that's another one of the topics on our list was going from global to local, as we've seen how disrupted things could get during a pandemic, moving things back onshore, other things like Brexit. There's a lot of tensions in the geopolitical and environmental spaces that make it maybe change the equation as to whether we produce something locally or send it overseas.
Dr. Lopkin, what do you think? I think that's a trend that has huge repercussions in the business world and in the overall global economy and world dynamics. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin? The whole thing about making domestic.
There's definitely a trend towards that, although it's going to be, I don't think it's going to shake out the way you think. It's actually going to encourage more globalization, because what's going to happen is things are going to be made closer to their delivery point. So U.S. products will be made more in the U.S., but products that are being shipped to Japan, China, Korea, more of that is actually going to be done in Asia. More things are going to be made in Europe if they're for the European market. Because what we saw during the pandemic was having a single supply chain where all of the factories were located in one area was devastating to businesses. Now you're going to see them working more locally to the areas that they are selling in.
Interesting, Keith. I think Dr. Lopkin has a great point as always. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, yes, I agree with that completely, and we are, that has big impact on our own labor markets, right? We have a skill misadjustment where we've got a lot of jobs that we are going unfilled, and we have a lot of people who need work and don't have the skills. So
what are those jobs that are going unfilled? I know Dr. Lopkin's pretty intent on that. Gentlemen, between the both of you, what jobs they're more in the trades, correct? Manufacturing, STEM jobs, correct?
Yeah, primarily we're talking about high-tech manufacturing jobs. So manufacturing is no longer, a bunch of people standing on an assembly line putting things together. It's AI is involved, robotics is involved, and we're not seeing the education in the American education system preparing people for these jobs. And the folks that have been in manufacturing for years have not kept up their skills, so as the systems get more complicated, they're not being trained to keep up.
I think that's a great point, because we've talked about higher education on Carnivore Radio several times, and isn't it going to be a possible realignment between higher education? Art history and what the world doesn't need is another marketing manager. Isn't there huge opportunities for maybe like a university like Goodwin University that's more in kind of this, or community colleges? Keith, what do you think of that? Are people going to reassess it? Hey, I can get a highfalutin degree in art history from, Trinity College, but, hey, if I go to community college for 2 years and get a STEM certificate or degree, hey, over the course of my lifetime, I might be far better off, Keith.
And I think, add to that is people are just going to look at how do I acquire skills, because not only
wait a second. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm going to let you continue. Hold on. I'm going to let you continue. But that's really interesting. So could it be that maybe a formal degree isn't really as salient as it once was, but like you were saying, that people will go in and out to get update skills, get new skills? It'll be more fluid. Keith, sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was a good point.
You can go online and take, where I was going with this is that, jobs like administrative and marketing jobs are using a whole new class of software, cloud-based software. You can go to Google, HubSpot, SEMrush, and take certificate-based classes that give you skills, and you can earn $50, $60, $70 an hour when you are proficient in those skills, and learn 3-4 company platforms. I'm involved with a project like this right now in a community to teach these skills to people so that they can get a $100,000 job.
Interesting. And do you think that's going to possibly, Dr. Lopkin, before we go to a break, blow up the higher education model that's been with us since afterworld, the post-war era?
It's already started. You're seeing, especially among Gen Z, they don't see the value in a 4-year degree anymore, especially when, for example, Connecticut community colleges actually have a program focused on high-tech manufacturing. You can get a 2-year degree, walk out of there making $100,000 right after community college without incurring all of the debt that higher education has become known for. So you're already seeing that shift.
Interesting. Do we go to a break now, Dr. Lopkin?
We do. We'll be right back.
To reach the next level, you need to operate at peak performance. The key to this is mastering the 7 elements of success. Learn how to master mindset, focus, operations, communications, innovation, evaluation metrics, and continuous improvement. Get the Biznetics way at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and bookstores near you.
And we're back. And remember, you can be part of the conversation. Call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693.
Well, interesting conversation, and it really is great because I think we are at a pivotal point more than ever in terms of things really tipping. There's always been momentum. Now I think the pandemic gave it its kind of final push. Let's move on to some other items on the list, Keith.
Well, there's two that are tightly interwoven, and that's the companies are becoming more purposeful and meaningful, and they're also committing to sustainability, not just for the reasons of doing good, but sustainable companies actually show that they attract more customers and better employees. So, I think that, and speaking of the shock of COVID, I just saw the other day that up to 50% of the workforce is considering quitting their jobs today. If they can figure out
why
how
is
to do
it?
it.
The economy's getting better? What is that? That's interesting.
And I think it's caused people to think about their purpose and the meaning in their life, and so they want to do things, right? So that idea of companies rethinking their values and the lifestyle that they offer their employees and what they do to build their brand and attract customers is not about the widget. There's very little differentiation among widgets, but you can differentiate your company by having a purpose or a mission that may have some social value as well.
Something we
like
just said is fascinating because there is less differentiation between widgets. There's a level of quality because of the global competition, whatever. 40 years ago, you could have a real crap product and it could hang around there for years. That does not happen. So you're right. A widget's kind of a widget in today's, global economy, but the difference could be is what you're talking about, sustainability and other types of more holistic concepts. Dr. Lopkin, comment?
Yeah, that's been an ongoing trend for quite a while. I think, in fact, most of the trends we're talking about weren't developed by COVID, but they were accelerated during COVID. Right. So we've seen these things for a while. Sustainability is a fantastic cost advantage. And if you're not wasting materials, if you're not wasting manpower hours, it's a lot more effective. And when you're putting out that vision that you're not just helping customers or shareholders, you're making all the stakeholders involved. In fact, it was just prior to COVID, the conference board CEOs came out and said, yes, stakeholder value is something that all companies need to focus on. And those stakeholders include the community, the customer, the employee, different organizations. So it's a lot more of a holistic vision than it used to be.
And that
interesting
efficiency and effectiveness
Go ahead,
that
Keith.
you mentioned is being pushed by the financial backers of companies because they know that sustainable companies make more money.
But it's interesting. Sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same or not stay the same. They sometimes go back to the future, so to speak, that, 50, 60 years ago, even a large company like a Stanley Black & Decker, a Fafner Bearing, they were large companies, but they had roots in the community that really went out the window. And maybe what you're saying, Keith, is that's kind of, and Dr. Lopkin, it's kind of possibly coming back, a more connection, a more connectivity to the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely been a return to community roots. Companies are more involved in their communities. They're partnering with nonprofits within their communities to help more people. And as you say, it really is a return to the way business used to be done.
Yes. All right, Mr. Reynolds, what's next on the list?
I'll throw two out, and they may seem different, but I think they have some connectivity, and that's social engagement. So your digital presence is an important channel, and investing in ways to have strong connections and communication, multi-channel communications with people in a more authentic way is important. But so is the idea of virtual interfaces, where we're automating the way we interface to our public through AR, VR, chatbots. So on the one hand, we're becoming more socially engaged, and on the other hand, we're using technology to manage that engagement.
Yeah, that's absolutely been taking off, and they are absolutely related, because companies got very involved in social media. They're engaging with more of their customers, but from a practicality point, you cannot engage with everybody person to person. This is why Facebook does not have a phone number where you can call them, because if 1% of their customers called them in a day, they don't handle that. So you've got more automation, more chat boxes, more knowledge bases and things like that, because you do need to stay engaged, but it literally is not possible to do this on a one-to-one basis anymore.
Right. I have a rule of thumb in working with companies that 80% of their engagement with customers comes through old-fashioned networking, and we've had to move that digitally online. And 20% comes from being found on the internet. But you want to write to and create content and create those interfaces to those 20%, because even if you go and meet somebody in person, or somebody introduces you, what's the first thing that person's going to do? They're going to go follow up and look at you online.
Absolutely. I mean, when people try out a new company, the first thing they do, they go to Google and they go, all right, let's see what this company's about. And the website will come up, recommendations will come up, reviews will come up, and they will research now. And I find it absolutely hilarious that people will do this. If they're going to buy a TV, they'll spend weeks researching. If they're going to use a business for something, something else, they will spend weeks researching. If we could convince people to do the same thing with their health and their doctors, we'd be in a much better place.
And they're voting
interesting.
too.
And you read my mind, Mr. Reynolds. Yes, instead of just going on emotionally based appeals, they actually understood what they were voting for. This country and local municipalities might be in far better shape. What's next on the list, Mr. Reynolds?
Another big one is decentralized finance. We're living in very nervous markets. The Fed the other day, this week, was making announcements or releasing statements about speculation creeping into the markets. But at the same time, it's hard for companies to raise capital. There's crowdfunding available. Blockchain and other sources of capital are coming to market. And so the entire space of capitalizing your company is changing. And there's a lot to learn for people.
Nice. Yeah, and it's more than just capitalizing a company. You're actually seeing finance as we know it become more spread out. It's been yelled about for years that, only 5% of Americans actually own stocks. Well, a recent survey showed 33% of people were planning on using their stimulus checks to invest in the stock market.
No way.
Yeah. So, because things like Robinhood, Charles Schwab dropping down to no fees, you can now start investing with as little as $5, where you used to have a $10,000 account. That's no longer the case. So you're seeing more and more Americans getting involved in the stock market, getting involved in investments, and it's really, it's no longer just the Wall Street elite.
That's right. Well, it's really crazy. My son put a few $100s into cryptocurrencies about 4 or 5 years ago, and he's got almost $20,000 from that.
Nice. That's really good. Okay, one more last trend, Mr. Reynolds. Great show, by the way.
So what else do we got? Automation. I think we've kind of touched on that.
How about a trend in terms of, let's look at our society, how we're going to interact. I think we're on certain trajectories, but I think COVID has changed people's priorities. I'm going to throw that as our last concept. I think people have, not everyone, but many people have come to the conclusion that money, careers, they're all important, but without some kind of connection, human, real connection, life has less meaning. And I think that's probably what you're talking about, is in terms of what you're saying, Keith, about people reassessing. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from the whole pandemic is people went from, especially, from the 1980s going far back in time, career. And in a lot of ways, when you have, $2 million in the bank, but you're living alone within quarantined under COVID, maybe the couple that are both librarians making a combined income of $110 looks a little better. Keith and Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, that whole reevaluation to have purpose and meaning, I think as we've had a year to sort of sit in solitary confinement, we reassess. And not only that, but you sat in quarantine with Zoom, and you've been connecting with people all over the world. And, we have now a much bigger middle class worldwide, and we're all interconnected. I think it's inevitable.
Dr. Lopkin, reassessing what's important. Do you think the pandemic has had an impact on that?
It's definitely had an impact. You have a lot of people realizing that things mean more to them than they thought they did. But you're also seeing it go in both directions, because now you're seeing millennials who everything was about their lifestyle and how they want to. Now they're going, oh, wait a minute. Now that they've actually started investing and actually looking at things, now they're going, you know what? Maybe it's not such a bad idea that I have a really good career. I can get back to some of this later. So you're actually seeing it go in both directions.
Is that really true happening with millennials?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it starting. There's been a couple of studies where they're adapting more to a traditional workforce rather than where they were demanding, all sorts of flex time and things like this. Now they've realized, all right, you know what? I want to go into an office. I want to spend time with coworkers. I actually want to be in a place. I don't necessarily want to be out on my own because it gets lonely.
Final thoughts, Mr. Reynolds. Great show, by the way.
Well, it's been fun. I mean, all these things, we see them in our daily lives, and we may not think about them. And so it's been fun to take these out and examine them and see what these big trends are and how they relate to the things we see on a day-to-day basis.
I think the big takeaway for me is, and I think Dr. Lopkin alluded to this, that, most of these trends were in process. But I do believe that the pandemic, not for all of them, but for many of them, have stepped on the accelerator. Mr. Reynolds, your final thoughts?
Well, we've been building toward them for a long time, and it's like the tipping point happened, right? And the high impact incident of having a pandemic before us really made us reach out and try and do things differently, and we had the tools to do it.
Yep, great show, guys. Dr. Lopkin, you would agree, huh? Amazing.
Absolutely fantastic show. You can catch us each week at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio, Fridays at 4. You can also catch the replay as well as the Carnivore Bites podcast each week at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. We'll see you next week.
Mr. Reynolds, thanks a lot.
I've enjoyed it, guys.